It's live. Okay, let's. Here we go. It's 12:01. I don't know. Yeah, got 6 people.
Hello, I'm Dale Popovich, and welcome to Facebook Live. And happy Father's Day out there to all the fathers that are watching, or their wives can tell them. I'm going to paint clouds today, but first I'm going to do a little advertisement. I am at Dillman's on September 17th. There's a 4-day workshop. It's a wonderful place to be for a workshop. You're on a lake, on a peninsula. It's kind of like the Disneyland of workshops as far as I'm concerned. And the folks there take really good care of you. I will be doing the great impressions of the North Woods, and I will be covering every season of the year that is up here in northern Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where we are living now. And it's for all levels, beginners, intermediates, and advanced. And as far as beginners go, you should have some experience underneath your belt, to be very truthful, so you don't get too frustrated. I'm also having a workshop at the Great Plains Watercolor Society in South Dakota on October 10th, 11th, and 12th. It's a 3-day workshop, and that should be a lot of fun. I'm also painting nature scenes of all 4 seasons. And you can go to GreatPlainsWatercolorSociety.com. It's a great place from what I understand. This is my first time there, and as far as I'm concerned, they're wonderful people. And I also have my online Zoom classes through the Palette and Chisel in Chicago from July 6th to August 3rd. And I have another session from August 10th to August 31st. They're 4 and 5 week sessions. So we're looking forward to that also. And if your art league is looking for a workshop or online or in person, you can email me at dalepopovich@gmail.com. All the information is on my website at dalepopovich.com if you're looking for any information. Okay, today, like I said, we're doing clouds, and the emphasis on this is clouds, of course. I minimized the landscape, if you have the photo in front of you. I've omitted the building that's off to the right, lower right side. It kind of has too much contrast in that area. People have asked, you have to have a center of interest. Not all the time. You can have points of interest that lead the eye, but a center of interest does make a much stronger composition. But it depends on what you really want to achieve. Today I'm using my indigo watercolor paper that I get through Cheap Joe's, and I'm using Core watercolor paints that I also get through Cheap Joe's. And I'm using basically 5 brushes along with a toothbrush. This is a very old brush. It's an Art Sign number 5 round. This is a number 12 round by Winsor Newton. I've had this one for over 40 years. And I'm using a 1-inch flat ox hair, and that's by Morella. I don't know whether the company's in business anymore. I also got this over 40 years ago. It's a great brush, but I use real hair brushes, which I feel is important, but you can get away with synthetic if you can't afford the real hair. I also have 2 rosemary brushes here. They're also on my website. This is a 3/4 inch pointed oval, as they call it. And this is a 1/2 inch pure sable, and that's also on my website. And I'm using toothbrush, and I may or may not use my sandpaper nail file. Sometimes I'll use sandpaper 220 grit because the paper I'm using is very soft and you don't want to abuse it. But this is my paper of choice. I also use Fabriano cold press and hot press, depending on the subject matter that I want to do. So,
first of all, if you didn't get the packet was on the event write-up. But if you didn't get the packet, I've also posted the link on the comments. And I want to say hello to Ellen. She said, hi, Dale and Marilee from the Hudson Valley, New York. Oh, what a pretty area.
That's a pretty area.
And also Lori Butler said, hello, Dale and Marilee.
Hello, Lori. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well this weekend.
Okay.
Okay, I am going to be using ultramarine blue, cobalt blue. The difference between the 2 blues is the ultramarine blue is yet still a cool color, but it is warmer than cobalt blue, which is cooler. I'm using sap green, raw sienna, and burnt sienna. So I'm just using 5 colors to portray this. And one thing that I always emphasize to the students is that don't let the photograph dictate everything to you. Remember, you're painting the painting, not the photograph. So if it looks a little different, that's fine. So I'm going to start by spraying a little water up on top here, just in the upper quarter quadrant of the paper. And I'm going to take the ultramarine blue and a little bit of the cobalt, not too much. And I'm going to start off by painting. Now, I'm always telling the students and professing to keep your edges as soft as you can for as long as you can. I'm changing value here by adding more water. And I'm going to tease in the lights on the clouds. I don't want to have too much dark. I may even use parts of the white of the paper for this. But right now I'm being kind of very abstract about this. I'm not going to commit myself in any one direction at this particular point. Now I'm adding a little bit more of the ultramarine blue in this area. And I'm going to kind of seep it up into here. But I'm trying to keep it very simple. Clouds are an interesting animal that we have in the sky. I always like to call things animals because it does change every 15 minutes or so, shape, size, color. And I'm going to be picking up with my natural sponge certain areas in the watercolor. So I'm taking and I'm adding a little bit more cobalt blue this time. As we get down towards the horizon, it's going to get a little bit cooler and grayer. So what I'm going to do with my natural sponge here is I'm going to pick up a little bit of this, not a lot. I want it to remain on the softer side. And in any watercolor, you really want to keep your edges as soft as you can for as long as you can. Sometimes you could take your brush, any one of them, any large brush, and we're always painting from large areas to small areas and background to foreground. And I am kind of teasing in here just a little bit. But I'm trying to keep all the edges of the cloud soft. Most of the time, all the edges are very soft in a cloud. So I'm going to take a little bit of the raw sienna, a tiny bit. That will help gray down the blue because the raw sienna is a grayed down warm color. And I'm going to go on the interior of the cloud at this time. And I'm going to bring this up to here, and I can control it with the sponge to a great degree. But maintaining some of these lights that I have in here become very important. I'm going to add a little bit more raw sienna and a little bit more cobalt blue. I want to get this a little bit darker as we come down. And you'll find that the values in watercolor, unlike oils, they do dry lighter. So you have to be kind of understanding of that. And the only way that you can understand that is to experience it. It's one of the few things that cannot be taught in watercolor, is how the paint dries. So I'm bringing that on down here, and I'm kind of teasing it in a little bit here and there. And if you still see the pencil lines, you can still erase the pencil lines to a certain degree, even after it dries. I always use a kneaded eraser, so I'll have that on hand. Then I'm going to simply bring this across. I'm toning down a lot of the clouds just a little bit more. And you always need to adjust values. You need to adjust the composition a little bit, which I have somewhat. But I'm going to bring this all the way down like so. And I'm working quite rapidly, as you do at the very beginning of a watercolor. Block those values in, which I have done that. I'm leaving a little bit of white up in there for right now. And I'm going down to the landscape. So I'm taking the sap green and the ultramarine blue, and I want to grade a little bit with the burnt sienna, which is a grade down red-orange. And while we got this wet on this edge, I'm going to go up in here and I'm going to tease the trees in. I'm going to add a little bit more ultramarine blue to this. And kind of drop in the trees where I want them and how I want them. If I go back into the trees, it will be very, very minimal because the concentration will be on the sky. So if you have any questions, please ask. I have my wife next to me feeding the questions, and I will add that she is the brains of the operation. So don't be afraid to ask questions.
No, we've got people. I was just waiting. First of all, Pat says, hi, you too. And Pat, and she's, wait a minute, let me find it again. Pat, and she said, he's right about Dillman's.
Dillman's is a great place. The people are wonderful. The sites are wonderful. And there's all sorts of artists there. From pastel to sketching artists to abstract to watercolorist to mixed media.
How many years has Pat been going to your workshop?
Pat's been going with me since she was 12. I think Pat was there before.
Well, Pat's the very first one when you were in around.
Right. So that was 5 years ago. Pat has been with me. Now I'm going to take the toothbrush.
I've got more. So.
And I'm going to do the last thing on here before I let it dry. I'm going to hit with the toothbrush. I know I'm covering it up. And spritzing some extra color on the bottom here. I don't want to have that run up into the sky. That's why I had my hand there. And one more thing. There's always one more thing, by the way. I'm going to take a little bit of this color and I'm going to plant some of these higher weed trees in here. I don't worry about the light that's down here, the white of the paper. I will either correct it or I'll leave it. There's different views on different watercolors. Some believe you should always leave the white of the paper. Those are the purest. And others say you don't have to, which is me. And also some watercolorists don't believe in adding gouache which is a white opaque paint, to the watercolor to paint with. And I believe that when I'm teaching painting, I want to teach different facets of it. So this is where I'm going to leave it dry here for a moment. So if you have questions, please ask.
Okay, Vicky, I know I'm not going to say your last name right. It's Vicky Lazewski. She said, hi from Lombard, Illinois.
Oh.
Last saw you at Elmhurst Art Museum classes.
Okay. I grew up next to Lombard in Glen Ellen.
Did I say her last name right?
Close.
Close.
I'm lousy at names.
Sorry, Vicky. I'm an artist. I don't know how to spell. I don't know how to pronounce names. All right, and then we had Dorothy and Ellen were saying hello to each other. And I just want to welcome you two ladies. Where are you from? And then lastly, you'll notice on the post, oh no, there's another one. On the post, I have included the link to Dale's Rosemary brushes. Now, it'll take you directly to Rosemary. It is an affiliate membership where he gets paid a certain percentage of the sales. I'd say it's like maybe 50 cents or a quarter, but it's the link there with all the brushes that he uses. And then there is, this thing is flying. Lori Butler, I agree, Dillman's is great experience.
Hi, Lori.
And Dorothy Burns, she's from New York. Pat's laughing. She had a hilarious laughing face. Sylvia, another outstanding job, Marilee and Dale.
Thank you very much. I can't say enough about Dillman. I had a workshop earlier this summer, and it went really well. It's always nice to go there because the owners treat you extremely well. And they're always concerned about your well-being and your needs that you may want. And they'll fix anything that you need to have fixed if you have something that needs to be fixed, of course.
That's teachers and students.
Teachers and students. They really treat you like gold. I've been at other workshops in different areas of the country where they come in, say hi, they introduce you, and you never see them again.
And they charge you for the cup of coffee.
Yeah. But again, this is a special place. And I'm sure South Dakota, because I've been in touch with them on the phone, they are just a group of wonderful people. And
it's quite a large watercolor society, too.
Yeah.
And they have a great logo. I don't know who designed it, but since logo's my thing, I just thought it was beautiful. And the colors.
So I'm waiting for this to dry. Always feel it with the back of your hand because the palm has oil on it and it will show up eventually. You really don't want that. But when I'm implanting the values on the paper, painting them, I'm trying to get an overall view right away so I have a relationship of the values, the temperature, the color, and the intensities that I'm looking for. So we always work our values from light to dark, but it doesn't mean you're not touching the darks. It's you're putting down something for the darks, but you'll go over to make it darker. Yes.
Lori, she said, how does temperature, humidity impact color with clouds and sky color?
Okay, good question. When you have high humidity, things are a little bit damper. Like when it rains, your colors actually become more intense. To give you an idea, on a fall day, you have a blue sky and you have these beautiful radiant colors, especially up here, that are cascading across the road. The colors are beautiful. And if it's dry out, they're not quite as intense. Then you get into a rainy day or let's say an overcast day first. The gray sky actually makes the colors look more intense. And they make them look more bright, it has more chroma to them. And it's something that you have to observe. Now, when you have, as far as, let's say, a little bit of a haze, up here we've had what I call the Canadian fog coming down which is the unfortunate burning of the forest up in Canada, things have a tendency of graying down right away, very quickly, in fact. And aerial perspective means not looking at it from up above. Aerial perspective means that your values they go from dark, your darks will go from dark to a little bit lighter as it recedes away from you. And your lights will go from a little bit lighter to a little bit darker. So what happens is that the values end up converging to where there's very little difference or contrast of value. And remember, value does all the work in a painting. If you don't have your values right, you can put all the color on it that you want, it still will not work. But when you have a foggy day, those values have a tendency of collapsing and you have less value, and your darks will get lighter quicker as they recede. Your lights will get darker quicker as they recede, which we've had a little bit up there the last few days.
Unless you're in New York City where it was orange.
Oh, New York City just got hit with all that stuff blowing down from just above them. I hope I answered your question.
All right, Chris said she's from Northeast Ohio and she's loving this so far. Vicky said she's been to Dillman many times. It's the best anywhere. And the host, which is Danny, is a watercolorist too. I think that's what makes it so much more special, is he really handpicks the artists that teach there. And his daughter's taken it over, Stephanie, and she's a real sweetheart.
She's been running it so far this summer because Denny and Sue remained in Florida a little bit longer than what anticipated.
And then Lori, let's see, kudos. Oh, sorry, Deb Yoder's here. She said, thank you for the kudos. Glad you like the website. It's a local business. And your logo is just beautiful. Then we've got Lori said, is the reference photo a humid summer day?
I don't remember. This was taken on Highway 51. I don't know if you can see this or not, but I'm going to show it.
Probably not.
I have a habit of telling my wife to take pictures out of her side of the window. Let's see if I can bring this up a little bit more. I don't think we can see it that well. Let's see.
I'll throw I don't know if I can throw the photo into.
Well, we've got a lot of lights above us. Right now we're broadcasting from Lola's
in Land O'Lakes.
In Land O'Lakes. It's a gallery and school. And they have a lot of artists and that belongs to here. But I would say that it was a breezy day. These clouds were rolling in from the west, but this was taken somewhere around, let me see, 5139 comes up through Stevens Point, because we took this a while ago, through Stevens Point in Wausau, Wisconsin, in the farmlands. It's pretty flat there. And I can't say that it was humid out. I don't remember what the temperature was. This was done a few years ago, unfortunately.
Also, we're filming here in Lola because we do have Starlink, and for TV and internet surfing, it's fine, but it kind of stops every so often when we're Zooming or doing a Facebook Live, because our cabin is in the midst of a pine cone forest.
Yes.
We have a lot of pine trees. So that's so what we're doing is we have Buy Dale a cup of coffee if you want to donate a few bucks his way, so we can get a 60-foot tower. Originally, when we were quoted before the pandemic, it was $2,000. Should have gotten it then. Now it's $6,000. So I will put the link in the comments.
So anyways, I'm holding this up to the camera a little bit more so that you can see the pencil lines, hopefully. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my kneaded eraser, and I do buy kneaded erasers every so often because they do get dirty, even though you pull them apart to clean them. But if you have pencil lines that are bothersome to your composition, you can erase them. If they're not, you can leave them. I drew this out with a 5B pencil, and I never use an H pencil because it's a hard lead and it will actually score the paper and kind of tear it because it's a very hard lead. Some artists will use up to 7, 8B pencils, and the lead is just so soft it actually dissolves in the painting of the watercolor. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to erase the lines here because they are what I call bothersome, and I'm just lightly doing it. I'm not trying to remove every little thing because the rest of it will kind of go away, but you can erase them right over the watercolor. It will make the watercolor, I will tell you, a little bit lighter. So I'm being very careful not to change the value of anything at this particular point. And again, it depends on where you want your darkest darks and so forth. But now I've gotten rid of most of the pencil lines. It's not something that is all that important sometimes. But I am softly removing them. Now, you still have to wait till the paper dries to a great degree before you go back in. So I'll wait just a couple more minutes. Please ask more questions. No more questions. Okay. All right. I'm going to go back into it. I think we're ready. I'm going to take my smaller rosemary pointed oval, and I'm going to go in with somewhat the same combination of color that I did at the beginning with the ultramarine blue and the cobalt blue. And I'm going to start off by painting in the middle of this section here. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to kind of spread it out a little bit. And with a little bit more of a damp brush, I'm adding a lot more value to this. Go back and add a little bit more. If I have a hard edge, I'm going to take a clean brush that's next to me here, not the same brush. And I'm going to tease this lightness out or soften the edges. And if I have any more edges, I'm going to take my natural sponge and I'm going to kind of soften that out a little bit. Now I can lift within certain darks and so forth if they're too dark, but I do want to keep that on that softer side so it doesn't attract too much attention off to the edge. So I'm going to take cobalt blue, again, more ultramarine blue than cobalt blue because it's warmer. And it's always warmer up at the top of the sky. And I'm going to put in a few passages of dark. And I'm not going to capture all those little crazy clouds up here, but I am going to emulate some of them. And come back in with the sponge just to keep things on the softer side. You have to remember, these things weigh tons and they float. It's marvelous on how they can do what they do and still stay up in the sky. Now I'm changing the value again by adding more water. And like I say, it depends on how much you want to put into the clouds. You know, I've had people say, well, you know, your first wash looked like it was done. Well, you can see what I'm doing by pulling out certain things here, that it needed more value, needed a little bit more intensity. And I'm going to very softly pull up so the transition from one area to another area is on the smooth side. down in here, we're going to have some sharper edges, not real sharp, but some sharper. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put in some more over here. So I am working much slower, if you noticed. I am working to where I can control things a little bit more. And I'm working back and forth between the sponge and the brush. I'm going to take the sponge with a little bit of paint on it, and I'm going to actually paint with it. I always say if it works, fine. If it doesn't, don't do it again. I've made a lot of mistakes over the years by experimenting, but that's what mistakes are for. They are for experiments. They're there to see what you can do, what you can't do with the watercolor. And always try to handle things in the simplest possible way. Do not try to overstate things, because that's where you'll get into trouble. I have a little bit more darkness in here. And again, look how dark this is and watch it as it dries. I'm going to kind of move it around a little bit. But watch it as it dries. It will get lighter in value. That's one of the things I had to get used to as a student, is how it dried. I wasn't getting my paint on the paper enough, and I was adding always too much water to it. So the consistency of painting, water ratio to pigment ratio, becomes very, very important. So I'm going to go down into the cloud now. I'm going to take that same color and I'm going to add a little bit of raw sienna to it, some cobalt, and I'm going to get a lot darker down in here. We're going to punctuate a few things. And I'm going to take my toothbrush just with water on it, and I'm going to, I shouldn't do that with other color in there, but we'll utilize it. I want to get in here and wet this area just a little bit and manipulate that value, that color at this point. And we have a lot of that color come right down to the trees and down, because it looked a little bit stormy. And you have to remember, clouds will cast shadows on the ground. It'll also cast shadows on themselves. And it depends on how they're overlapping, where the sun is at. And that's one of the things you always need to consider before starting. Where's your light source? How is it going to react to your subject matter? And I'm just touching it into the trees here at this point. I have a little light cloud down here trapped with all these wonderful darks. And what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to not make it as light, but I'm going to put it in, but it won't be as prominent. Now this comes up into here a little bit, and I keep on rinsing the brush off to get more and more pigment off the brush, and so I can tease in some of these things that need to be put in. So I'm going to add a little bit more ultramarine blue, a little bit more of the raw sienna, and a touch of the cobalt. That was too much. There we go. Now we're back. And I'm going to go right up against that light edge, but I'm not going to go into it. So I'm going to take my 1-inch brush and I am going to soften all of these areas down here again. And I'm going to take a little bit of that dark that's up in here, like so, and then soften it again. And I need a little bit more dark right off over here. Now clouds can be multiple colors depending on where the light is in the sky, especially as it starts setting or it's rising, and how much pollution is in the air will also dictate how much color is in the cloud by the particles that it's carrying. Now, you have to ask yourself at certain points, what else do I need to put in on a simple subject? And this is not a real simple subject, but it is a subject that should be handled simply. Even if it's the focal point, it will have a tendency of being a little bit more dynamic in a simple way. And I'm taking these spots that are a little bit too light here and kind of teasing it out. And every time I'm doing this, I am rinsing my brush, which I don't normally do when mixing color. Okay, I'm going to bring in some of these different facets of the cloud that kind of dimple in a little bit. You can do it a little bit easier when it's wet sometimes. They'll maneuver a little bit nicer. I have this little bit of a cloud right here, but it's not going to be as light as what's in the photograph. And I can kind of come in here and lift out. It's still soft because the area around it is wet. And I'm going to go up in here right now. I'm going to leave that dry down there. And I'm going to soften this up in here a little bit. And we have a couple extra clouds up in there that I don't feel were needed for the composition. So you have to be careful what you put in. It's always more important what you leave out than what you put in. And like I say, I'm giving my impression of what's here. I never copy a photograph. It's not there to copy. It's there as for an inspiration to create a piece of artwork. So I'm kind of bringing up a little bit here, a little bit there. I'm not looking at all the little details, but I am looking at small individual facets of the cloud and to see what's important. So I'm adding a little bit of the color up in there that has a little bit more raw sienna in it, and I'm going to attach it to that cloud. I'm going to take up a little bit there with the paper towel. And I am looking at what else I need to put in. So I'm going to take a little bit of the cobalt blue and a little bit of the mixture that I've already worked with, and I'm going to put a little bit of blue down in here. So I'm just teasing it in. Now I'm going to work on the lower part of the landscape and leave this dry and see how much I need to manipulate those values up there. And do I need to go any darker? Do I need to go some lighter by lifting in some spots? It's something that I tell the students to get up off of their seat and take a look at it from 5-6 feet away, or even 8 feet, and decide, is it done? Is it not done? Do I need to add something here? Decide on 1 or 2 things, go back, do it, then step back again. And what I did as a student is I borrowed my mother's egg timer. At this point of the painting, I set it for 10 minutes. When it go off, I stopped what I was doing and I went and stepped away from it. So when I'm painting in the studio, I start off by standing or sitting. I keep on moving back and forth, depending on what I'm doing. Question?
Lori wants to know, is the light source upper right?
Yes, it is. We were headed north, this way, of course, and the light is coming from the south, and because during the summer the sun rises a little bit more in the sky. It's because we're tilting more towards the sun, so it has the appearance of rising. Where in the winter, we actually move back, and the sun has a tendency of going down. So we kind of tilt towards and away from the sun as we rotate around it. But this is coming from the south, which is behind us. And by the looks of the clouds and so forth, I would have to say it was somewhere around 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But it's really hard to say. This year we've had some very odd weather and some pollution in the air from the fires, and as I had stated before, and everything is a little different. And we're finding that living up here, which is very interesting, the sun starts coming up about 4 o'clock. So the woods become illuminated ever so slightly. And then by 5:30, 5:45, it's up pretty well where you can go take a walk in the woods if you wanted to. But it's interesting.
And it's dark. I mean, it's quite late before the sun sets.
Yes, it's onwards to going past 9 o'clock before the sun starts setting completely to where you have no light. And the further north you go, we were up in Ontonagon, Upper Peninsula one year watching the sunset on the beach.
With our friends Bob and Judy.
Yeah, and it was close to 10 o'clock before the sun actually disappeared beyond the horizon, which was kind of cool. What we didn't realize is that there were a number of people behind us, probably close to 100, that came out of the woods onto the beach applauding. It was like the light show is done and they're all going to go home at this point. But it was a lot of fun. All right, I'm going to go in, I'm going to make the trees darker at the base of this, here and there. And I'm dry brushing this in. And I'm using the side of the brush. And I will be omitting all this light. This is distracting down here. So I will be omitting it. So I'm going to add a little bit of raw sienna to this. And I'm not using a whole lot of water at this point. But I want a variety of value going across. I don't want it to be the same value, same color. I'm going to change it as I move, because some trees block the light, the other ones will be getting light. So variety is what we're looking for. Not a lot. You don't want crazy variety going on, but you do want variety so that things do show up a little bit differently here and there. And that will also lead the eye much nicer than having the same thing. So I've used a lot of raw sienna in here, which is warmer, lighter. And I want to keep this on the softer side. This is actually too harsh down here. So I'm taking a damp brush. It's still wet, but I'll take a damp brush to get rid of those harsher edges. And I'm going to take a little bit of the cobalt blue with a clean brush. And I want a little bit of a blue showing in here. That it's way back on the horizon. It's from painting as many years as I had. There's certain things that you remember that can be. Since I am using a limited palette, which I think can be much more effective than using too much color. And you learn to mix the color better. You don't want to have a lot of color on your palette, mainly for the fact that by the way that you do that, it kind of shows that you don't know what color to choose. You really only need a short palette to make color work. And you can get more interesting combinations. Now, I'm not going to do anything over here. That's fine. Leave it alone. I am going to come into the foreground here, and I am going to paint this from dark to light, because as this recedes, this is going to get lighter on the ground, the grass, not the bushes. They'll get a little bit later too, but we want this to be a little bit more expressive in the foreground, so I'm taking a little bit more of the raw sienna and the sap green. And I just spattered my wife.
Oh well.
And then I'm going to dry brush this across. Anybody that's near me, it knows that occasionally I'll spatter things and not to put their coffee down near the palette, because I have a habit, like a magnet going to metal, of dipping in the coffee. And I did that to a student at the workshop, unfortunately.
Where's your phone? Your telephone? Oh, thank you.
And I'm going to put in some of these shrubs here that add a little bit of interest down towards the bottom. And I'm going to dry brush those in just a little bit. And if they're too harsh, go back in and soften them. This gives the foreground a little bit of interest, but not overwhelming. Now, what I'll do is I'll take paper towel. So I want to add a little bit more interest. But I'm going to take a paper towel that is somewhat on the clean side, face down, and I'm going to place that across the clouds. And I'm going to take a little bit of the cobalt blue straight, and I'm going to spritz that into the thing with the toothbrush. So I'm just using the very end of the toothbrush, and I'm going in and taking pure color, and I'm going to push this into here a little bit. That brings some of the blue down from the sky into the landscape. And the paper towel allows you not to spritz the sky, and because you don't want to end up with a bunch of sparrows up there. And I'm going to take a little bit of the pure raw sienna, and I'm going to put it right through here just a little bit. That adds a little bit of sparkle to the ground, but not too much that it supersedes the sky. A little bit over here. So it's a matter of slowing your process down towards the end and seeing how much do you really need to add, how much is needed for the composition. Like I say, I don't have a focal point here, but I'm hoping that the clouds will lead you up and around, and the landscape at the bottom will be the character actor in the scene. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to add or soften some of this back here by taking just a damp brush. You'll see how dry this is. I may have to take a hair dryer to the top of this because I don't want to go back into damp paper. That's where we could have some areas that get ruined. So I may take a minute here to dry the painting, but I'm trying just simply to add another feeling of dimension here. I'm going to get rid of the white, as I said before, of the paper here and there, because that white sparkle will detract the eye from where I want it to be. So I'm going to take the, do you want to plug that in? Mm-hmm. I'm going to take the dryer and I'm going to dry this. There's an extension cord in there too, in a black case. But this is fairly damp, and if you take a look, it has a little bit of play in the paper. It bounces so that it's, you know it's not dry. And I'm going to soften the tops of some of these trees just with a damp brush. So here goes the dryer just for a minute. That's about all I need. Usually I just sit and watch it dry, but since we're time limited here and so forth, I do use the hair dryer. Okay, there's some things that I need to address. And when I stood back and looked at this for a moment, there's two things that I saw, or one thing that I saw in my wife, who also has a good eye, she's in the art field, she also saw it. And let me point it out to you. So sometimes you do things and you don't notice it because you're talking and not always paying attention. These two spots right here, if you look at them, I'm looking at them on the screen, which you can see it in the smaller form. You can see that this looks like there's eyes coming out of the cloud. They're not equal in size.
It's an ostrich.
My wife says it's an ostrich.
Because you got the beak right here.
Oh yeah, there's a beak there. So I need to correct that. And I then first have to decide how I want to correct it. And I can see that one thing I need to do is, I wasn't really happy with this going up and over here. So what I need to do is I need to get rid of some of this, connect this to this. So before I do that, are there any questions at all?
Okay.
I'm going to wipe my palette clean.
Lori says, I've never used raw sienna in any of her clouds. What a great difference.
It brings a little bit of warmth into it. You can also use yellow ochre. Yellow ochre is a grayed down cool yellow. In other words, the primary yellow is in the middle. The raw sienna is off to the right on the warm side. It's grayed down. And the yellow ochre is off to the left, and it's grayed down, but it's a cool yellow, grayed down. And the reason why I use raw sienna more so is that it plays well with other colors. Thank you. And I will use raw sienna when painting winter scenes, when the fall grasses are just still shooting out of the snow. It has a nicer impression because snow scenes are cooler. The snow is cool. And it's called a convening color. It means you don't have to mix it. Burnt sienna is a convening color. You don't have to mix it up. You can actually create it, but having it on your palette as a convening color makes you be able to mix up things quite rapidly. And the raw sienna becomes, and the burnt sienna become kind of a go-to red and yellow for me that are already grayed down. But I like yellow ochre, but I don't use it too much. Any others? I'm also thinking of adding another color to my palette for demonstrations and so forth, and that would be vermilion as a red. I don't like the cadmium colors for private reasons. Actually, it's one is that the cadmiums are also a little poisonous, even though I use cadmium yellow medium occasionally. But I'm also kind of experimenting with using some different colors at this point. All right, I'm going to connect this up into here. I'm going to get rid of this thing that flies off the paper up here. It leads the eye a little bit too much. So I'm going to go to the cobalt and the ultramarine blue. And I'm going to use a lot of water. But I'm going to break this up here. And you'll find out that it will be a little bit more playful. So I'm going to put a little bit darker color in here. Then I'm going to take my 1-inch flat and I'm going to kind of soften the edges of this a little bit and have it go off up here. And then soften this coming down into here. And I'm being very, very careful with this because the clouds, if you do one mistake on it, it could shoot the whole painting, which is not what we want to do. So I'm going to take my smaller brush here and I'm going to add some emphasis on a few areas down here. Then I'm going to take the natural sponge. I like using a natural sponge. My father was a color etcher, photo engraver, and he had a lot of natural sponges left over that I found after he passed away. And I found that they are a lot nicer to work with than the cellulose sponges that are man-made. And I'm going to bring a little bit of value change in this larger area here. So it's a matter of modeling things back and forth, teasing things in. I'm going to darken this in a little bit up here, a little bit more. Leave that alone. Then I'm going to go into this area that is up above here, and I'm going to darken in a few things up there to portray a few things, soften it with the sponge. Some of the hardest things to paint, I found, go all the way back to my college days, are little boys and little girls, babies, their faces, because you got to treat them with this nice, tender, soft brush, almost like painting a balloon. And when I first tried it, I ended up having my painting look a lot older. It looked like a 40-year-old little person. So I'm treating the edges here a little bit differently. I kind of like that, the way it wisps up there. So I'm not softening, but I'm adding a little bit of punctuation on this part of the cloud. This has no paint on it at this point. And I'm being very careful with not to overwork. So I'm going very, very slowly, tediously, so that I don't have, and every subject you do is a little bit different. It's nothing is the same. Colors are different, temperatures different, and the subject matter has to be handled with less aggression of putting on the paint. So I am looking at different things in here that need to be taken care of. Now I'm going to go in, I'm going to add a little bit of raw sienna to this and a little bit of burnt sienna to this. So I'm graying down the cloud area a little bit more, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add small patches of grayness to the clouds here and there where it is it's in shadow. So I'm slowly building this up. If you build it up too fast, most likely you'll be sorry. I have a lot of those that are in a landfill someplace. So I'm adding some more depth to the clouds. I'm adding a little bit of character to the clouds. I'm going to add a little bit more burnt sienna. I mean, just a tiny bit. A little bit more cobalt blue. and a lot of water, because I don't want this to be too prominent, but I want it to be just dark enough for certain areas. I'm going to leave that there. It's a little bit on the dark side, but that's okay. I'm going to wait till it dries and then manipulate it, because we know that it's going to dry differently. And I'm leaving lighter edges along the clouds in some areas where they are receiving a little bit more light. But I'm just being very careful with how much work I'm going to do up in the clouds. I had one student where I taught, and after my first wash, he says, "You're done. Put a band on, put a frame on." He always liked to handle things very simply, which was fine. Add a little bit of raw sienna to this in here. Bring it down. And I'm very careful putting in the final touches. If anybody has any questions, please ask.
No.
Because we're actually pretty close to being done. I don't want to overwork this, so I have lots of room for character.
Is that too heavy?
So I'm adding, going all the way across the bottom part of the cloud to connect this a little bit better. Oops. And I am paying attention to some of the smaller details in the clouds at this point, so that I get enough character into the cloud. Now you can see that that spot that I put up there looked dark. It's diminished in value quite a bit at this point. And I have the advantage here of looking at the monitor, which reduces my painting to about quarter size. And I can see what it looks like when it's really tightened up. And this needs to be toned down over here. So I am toning this down to make it kind of disappear a little bit. And I'm going to add a little bit of raw sienna, almost straight raw sienna down here at the bottom. Very lightly, tease it out a little bit. That brings some of the warmth into the base, and we always have a little bit of yellow in the color at the horizon anyways. I'm just going to emphasize it a little bit more. And there's always something you can do, but I hesitate to have a student go ahead and do something beyond what they really need. Now I'm going to come in here and soften this a little bit. And I think I'll take the opportunity to show you, if I still have any left there.
Is that in your box?
I'm going to see if I have any in the cell at this point. Yes, I do. I have a little bit of white gouache in a watery substance here. Just ever so lightly. I hadn't planned on it, but I want to show you since we have time. This is something that you can do with your watercolors. It's totally legal, as they say. I'm going to pull up just a little bit of color right in here, soften that edge. I'm being very careful not to have this too sharp on any edges, because otherwise we have a tendency of, a sharp edge will attract the eye. That's why I say you keep your edges as soft as you can for as long as you can. You want to attract the eye at the end, not at the beginning. So we got some dark clouds here. I got a little bit of gouache, as I said, and I'm going to add that in on certain spots with a lot of water. And that makes it translucent. In other words, you can see through the pigment to the paper to a certain extent. I don't have pure white, which I would never use pure white anyways. But the gouache allows you to add another dimension to your watercolors. And not be too bold about it. And I'm going to add a little bit up in here. And this is, I got it on the gray-green side, which is fine with the composition. Like I say, I don't want to enter too much into this. So I've added just a little bit of that white, and I'm going to drop it in here very fluidly. So it's got a lot of water in it. There's still some light spots down here I don't care for. And I'm going to take a little bit of that, a little bit of the blue and put it through here. That has a little bit of a shadow being cast from the trees right across the ground here at that point. And some of these little white dots up here, if they're annoying, which to me right now they are just a tad annoying, I'm going to work with them. So I'm going to add a little bit more raw sienna down here, like so. Then I'm going to take clean water with my 1-inch brush and do final manipulations. So what I do is I clean the brush off, squeeze out all the excess water out of it, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do minor little things. You never do anything major towards the end 99.9% of the time. There's been occasion that I have, by putting a very quick wash across a large portion of the painting. I don't advise it too often, but I do it once in a blue moon when I find out something is not working. And I'm going to soften this up over here so the transition is a little bit nicer. And I want to add just a little bit of punctuation. And I mean just a little bit. It's going to be put down and teased away. That shows the cloud form turning a little bit more. So it has a tendency of going back a tad more than what it was before. Okay, I'm going to take the tape off, see where we're at. How many folks are still out there?
Oh, Lori said she likes the addition of the yellow at the horizon. And there's 16 people hanging in
Well, that's good.
out of 18.
I appreciate all you folks watching. You can see, now I spent a little over an hour doing this. It's something that I call this, when you're doing a demo, it's really a learning tool. I would do a full sheet of watercolor paper with this, which I've done before, and the clouds become very dynamic. And also at the same time, you're actually working more in the clouds because it's more close up to you. I'd probably put more in a landscape, but demonstration is a learning tool. People always want to know what the difference is. And that's the biggest thing, it's a learning tool. So what I'm going to do, just for fun.
Pat says thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for watching. Is I'm going to take the nail file, and I'm going to add a few of the. You could do this with paint if you wanted to, with white gouache. But it's no longer white of the paper. I'm adding the feeling of light flowers, if you want to call it that. The daisies are out up here. I can't tell you how many daisies my mother had in her yard growing up through the grass. She says, don't mow those down, so I'm going around all the daisies very carefully. Childhood things that you remember. But that's to bring a little bit of character into the foreground. Brush it off a little bit. Sandpaper, you can get glistening on water with sandpaper. You can do all sorts of stuff to get texture with sandpaper. But these are the things that I always enjoyed doing, is painting nature. This is the thing that kept me sane from the age of 19 to almost 21. I had lost 80% of my sight at that point. I had a cyst on the optic nerve, no peripheral fields, and I had almost a 9-hour brain surgery. And I got my sight back. I learned how to walk again. I had to learn how to climb stairs and learn how to spell, believe it or not. Well, I never was that great of a speller to begin with, but actually I can spell pretty good now. But I had to learn how to spell again. Things that I had lost that I had always took for granted, and I was a plumber at the time. So the move from being a plumber to a watercolorist, I'm still in the water business. But anyways, it's something that is near and dear to me. The North Woods, this is what kept me sane, is visions of that when I could not see. So I want to thank you all for watching today. And the more questions we'll take.
Okay, Ella said, great demo, thanks. Chris said, I have learned so much today. Thank you so much. Lori said, thank you, learned a lot. Roberta said, thanks very much.
Thank you for watching, and you're welcome.
Oh, and did you tell them about next month? Watercolorscape Saturday?
Oh, next month, Watercolorscape Saturday is on July 15th, which is the third Saturday of the month. And in August, we will not be having one. We're going fishing.
And we're going painting.
And painting, fishing and painting. My wife loves to fish. I love to fish. So while I'm painting, I will have a pole in the water that my wife will be attending to. So thank you again for watching. I really appreciate your thoughts, your comments, and your questions. And I hope to see you in person someday.
Lori said thanks. See you next time.
You bet. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Happy Father's Day.